Now, in some parts of Kent, there's an invasive species threatening to take over the coastline. But some people are fighting back, as Emma Thomas reports.
The North Kent coast near Ramsgate. A calm, beautiful morning, sea salt hanging in the air. It's a tranquil scene. But there are mysterious figures on the coastline. They're all wielding axes and they're ready to use them.
One down, thousands to go.
Elaine Newman is on a mission to destroy oysters, and we're going to find out why she's got it in for them. The oyster is a common sight along the Kent coast. In fact, every year a festival is held in Whitstable to celebrate them. Farming native oysters used to be a huge industry along the Kent coast.
With an hour in the month, our thoughts turn to that delicious, silent hanger-on, the oyster. They're in excellent condition, due its thought to the sun having warmed up the water more than usual.
But trouble began back in the 1960s. Overfishing and a virus meant the industry was on the verge of collapse. So the answer was to bring in Pacific oysters. And yes, it did save the industry.
But it's also an invader that's threatening the coastline as we know it. And one of its victims is the blue mussel.
Back in 2007, Willie McKnight started surveying the coastline. He discovered that oysters were starting to spread onto the mussel beds, and the danger was they could start killing off the mussels. And he was right.
I can show you this if you like. This is from this site. This is a native mussel here, and an oyster larvae has settled on it. And as the oyster grows in size and weight, it seals the two shells of the mussel together. So this mussel will not be able to filter feed, and in fact it's dead now.
Blue mussels are an important food source for lots of other creatures, like birds, crabs and dog whelks. If oysters take over, the wildlife can't feed on them instead of the mussels because their shells are too thick. So, in steps Elaine, the oyster slayer and guardian of the coast.
So what are you doing here and why?
I want to preserve it for, not just for me, but for my children, grandchildren.
Elaine is a member of a volunteer group called the Coastbusters. But what's with the axe?
We come out and we have our tools, and when we find one of these Pacific oysters, we just literally slice the tops of them off, exposing the alive jelly inside, which gives the birds something to eat. And they're dead then, they can't reproduce.
Willie's team have had some success here and are credited with stopping this mussel bed turning into an oyster reef.
It's no mean feat. These guys are part of a team that have hacked off more than 220,000 Pacific oysters here.
And that's over the last 6 years. But it has to be done carefully so as not to damage the chalk reef they're trying to protect.
So if you swing the hammer with the axe end and hit it on that hinge there, give it a good blow. Perfect.
Willie says that the oysters have spread out of their designated farms and along the coast because of climate change.
The rising sea temperatures have enabled them to reproduce, and they are spreading now along the coast.
And you're the first line in the defence of that?
Well, hopefully, yes.
Oysters can change sex from male to female according to age, feeding and environmental conditions. Female oysters release about 50 to 200 million eggs in a single spawning event. Once released, the eggs form a small cloud in the water. When meeting the sperm of male oysters, the eggs are fertilised and become larvae. They spend several weeks drifting over large distances. When they're ready to settle, they metamorphose and attach to rocky surfaces in shallow and sheltered waters. So the mussel beds and the chalky beaches of Kent make the perfect home for oysters.
It's mainly the chalk reef is quite unique. Although it's super abundant in Kent, chalk is quite an unusual coastal substrate. I think only a bit less than 1% of the UK coastline is chalk, and there is species that live in the chalk, drill into the chalk and live. And if that's converted to an oyster reef, then a lot of these species won't be able to survive. And it's trying to preserve those habitats and not allow the oysters to overcome them and reduce the biodiversity of the site.
Further up the coast is a stark example of why the work of the Coastbuster volunteers is so important. In Epple Bay, the oysters have taken over.
Every step we're stepping on them. It's hard, we can't avoid them.
Nadine Atchison-Balmond is a marine and coastal advisor for Natural England in Kent.
So what are we looking at here then?
So what we're looking at is an absence of all the species that you'd usually find. So there's no crabs, fish, shrimps, and all the things you'd find in normal healthy rock pool.
So this would be teeming with wildlife?
Yeah, it would definitely be teeming with wildlife, and like you can see, we haven't seen anything swimming around or scumpering around.
It's too late for Epple Bay, isn't it? Why is that?
Yes, it is really. The oysters, like you see here, are starting to grow one on top of the other, and rather than growing in a horizontal position, which they do in less affected places, they start growing in a vertical position. It's got past the point of no return.
The oysters have taken over at Epple Bay. But back at Western Undercliff, Willie and the Coastbusters continue their battle to make sure this beach doesn't suffer the same fate.
Do you feel like you're making a difference?
Yes, it's a forever task. We'll never eradicate them, but I think if the team hadn't been working here, what we're seeing now would look completely different. We wouldn't be seeing mussels and bare chalk. We'd be looking at a complete coverage of oysters for other species.
And it's an all-weather job, isn't it?
Sometimes it gets a bit wet, occasionally.
Right, let's go.
Due to the success of Willie's Coastbusters project, the Kent Wildlife Trust are also going to launch a team of volunteers further along the chalky North Kent coast, so our beaches can continue to provide a home to all sorts of wildlife.
That was Emma Thomas reporting. Now,